Good morning, afternoon, or evening. I am Stephanie Joy with All Things Social Security and the attorney at Joy Disability. You're about to see what should be a question and answer format type of chat from our live session on a particular topic that we find that a lot of people keep asking about. So I'm sharing it here. If there are pieces that could have been added that weren't added during the live, because it's a kind of a fast-paced Q&A that we do every Wednesday at 1 p.m. You might just find that I added something to the end of it to give it a little more clarity and a little more details for those that are interested in that particular topic. So check to see if that's at the end. Otherwise, enjoy the video. Bye-bye. Kathy says, if my kids have DAC benefits, okay, disabled adult child benefits she's referring to, and got a lump sum payment in the beginning, can Medicaid make me spend that down to get Medicaid? You know what? I'm not going to be able to give you a solid answer on this, Kathy. So it sounds like your kids have DAC, which means it sounds like it's not on you. So you're not the disabled, retired person on whose record they are getting their DAC. Would that be fair to say? Because if you were, you would have Medicare, and this Medicaid would be less of an issue. Would that be correct? So they're getting it off of somebody else. You yourself are feeling indigent enough to warrant Medicaid, which I understand. I mean, health insurance, if you don't have a job that provides it, and I would encourage everyone to go get that job. That should be such an enticement to take a job that might not be the dream job, but having your health insurance is really important. I think that the push for everyone to don't work unless it's your dream job was a real destructor in terms of people's health. And I mean that. So many people that could have had health insurance and don't. But then, of course, there's a lot that can't work full-time enough to get the health benefits, and they don't generally offer it for part-time. But there are creative ways, so it's just something to think about. Whether or not, so I think the bottom line question, though, is assuming what we all just said is so, will the children's lump sum benefits be used against you as if it was yours to spend? I think I don't have anything in front of me, so I can't say it. Logically, of course, it should not, because that money is supposed to be only sent for them and not for you, right? You're not supposed to use it. I mean, granted, part of it could be their portion of the rent overhead, but the rest of it is from you. That's only their portion. So I'd like to think not. I don't know, though, if that means, Kathy, that you have to have that in a properly designated account. I don't have that information for you. As you probably heard me say before, if you've been here before, we don't practice this Medicaid stuff. It just happens to be some of the issues that exist in many clients and pro se and people paying attention, their lives, because obviously Social Security disability doesn't provide for, well, federal doesn't provide the Medicaid anyway, it's by your state. So it's going to be, I would contact the state and find out, have your friend do it if you don't want to call, And there are things you can do with those DAC benefits that would be, first of all, like I said, they're not really yours. Just because you are the custodial parent and you're caring for it for them, even that means spending it on their overhead and whatever, which is what, dependency benefits are all about. But I would like to think that they wouldn't count as long as you don't have it sitting in your own fat account, looking like your regular monies if you have it in a properly designated account. But I would make sure, and I would contact, I know this is probably hard, everything's probably online, I don't know, your local Medicaid office. It's probably by county, so it's not even just one big state office. You got to go, I mean, there's a gazillion counties, right? And check it out that way to make sure how that would be done. Because if worse comes to worse, then you maybe use those DAC benefits for something that will be for your kids later, but doesn't count as a gift away, or I'm not sure what that would be, because it's their money, not yours. Like if it was your money, I would be like, pay down the mortgage, because your house doesn't count against you. So if you use money for that, it's less mortgage you're going to be paying down the road if you're going to be stuck on, low fixed income. You want to have all those future bills as low or close to zero as possible, so that any fixed income, whether it's SSI or SSD or Social Security retirement, more of that can be put to what you want to put it to, instead of these bills that are pay downable. Hello, I am Stephanie Joy, the attorney at All Things Social Security and Joy Disability Law. Your video is about to start. I just wanted to remind you that if you click the join button below, you can learn more about the memberships offered at a very affordable price that can give you a little more direct attorney answers to your questions. Have a great day and enjoy the video. Hello again. Okay. Medicare, in relation to disabled adult children. So just to re-explain how disabled adult children who don't have work records of their own can still get Social Security. Here's a quick rundown, and then we'll talk about the Medicare. Okay, so if a adult child can prove that they were disabled between the ages of 18 and 22, and sometimes it started way before 18, but it has to continue all the way through to when they're applying for DAC benefits. DAC benefits are a dependent benefit underneath the working parent, usually working parent's work record. And a child who, people under 18 can't get Social Security disability on their own record. Over 18, they can if they have a work record. And that would be true for a DAC child. Maybe he could work enough to make enough credits to get his own Social Security disability, but he can also be potentially eligible for DAC, and that's off of his parents' record, which would be potentially a greater amount than under his own record since he didn't have a lot of years to work and it was probably low-skilled work. They have to have been provably disabled, which means under SGA at all times, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, so one specific instance that often happens is a child who is disabled and then is proven disabled at 18 when they have to do that redetermination to see if they're disabled under the adult standard. They might then get SSI, which again, they might not have been eligible for as a child because their parents may not have been poor enough. So now they're 18, their parents' money does not count for them, thankfully, and they may be eligible for SSI. However, eventually they might be eligible for DAC. The first point in which they can get it, assuming they continue to be disabled and have no gaps in disability. In other words, don't be doing that SGA work. If they're going to work, keep it under SGA. So when a parent either files on their own or for disability or retirement or passes away, now the child that was disabled, the adult child who was disabled prior to the age of 22 can now apply for DAC. That's whether he's on SSI now or anything else or not at all. So then the question becomes, when can he get Medicare? Can he get Medicare? Yes, he can. Like everybody else, he will generally have to be having collected 24 months of the Social Security, which is the DAC, under his mom or dad's record. Must have been collecting that for 24 months worth. I don't want to say 24 months of collecting it, because by the time he wins his DAC, he might have some back benefits that will already count. So if he has 6 months of back benefits, you're 6 months out now. Or if it takes longer, it feasibly can be that the 24 months are all part of his back benefits for DAC. And there is, I'm not going to go into this part very much, but people get concerned about, but is he going to lose his Medicaid? They do have special rules so that when you get that higher income, because you're now able to collect under that hardworking parent's work record that has now been triggered, even if the money would otherwise have put you outside of the arena for Medicaid coverage, like you had before when you were on SSI, they do have a special rule that prevents that. So if the only reason you would lose your Medicaid is because now your income from DAC, which replaced your SSI income, is now too much to be within the Medicaid rules, there is an exception now for that. Now, if you have other income on top of it, and it's not just the DAC monies you got, let's say you have working income that tips you over, whatever, then it's not going to apply. But it won't be that changing from DAC. There's no disincentive to apply for the DAC due to that reason. You will be protected and be able to keep the Medicaid, as I understand it. But eventually you'll become eligible for Medicare. And by and large, I expect, although I have not specifically researched this, but I suspect it applies like it does for everybody else. You will be expected to take the Medicare when it's available, unless possibly you have creditable coverage, which is probably unlikely because it usually results from a spouse who has a group policy from their current employer, and you're included on that. But with DAC, you generally can't be married you can be married, but it has to be another disabled person or a DAC beneficiary. So my thought is that person probably isn't working for a company, or they might have lost their DAC unless they get benefits working part-time, because that DAC spouse would not probably have a kind of employment benefits. That's just, I'm thinking off the cuff there, but that's what seems logical to me in today's realities. So again, for most DAC people, 24 months of worth of receipts of DAC or Social Security disability will get you the Medicare. There are exceptions for sure for ALS, that's Lou Gehrig's disease. You don't have to wait the 2 years, thank goodness. And I think also end-stage renal disease, I believe. So definitely look those up if either one of those apply and do your due diligence, but things to look out for. Yeah, so Medicare will be coming, which is great because it's usually better than Medicaid. And also, there's always a potential, look into this too. If you have low income on your DAC, you might be dual eligible for both Medicaid and Medicare. And the nice part about that is the Medicaid, which I believe would be secondary, will cover the copays and the deductibles that Medicare would otherwise leave you with and leaves everybody with, unless they have a gap policy, a sub policy. So anywho, all you DAC people or parents of DAC people, I hope that helps. I'll talk to you later. Bye. Hey, so if the subject matter of the video you just listened to is of interest and you want more on it, stay tuned. Here's another one about the same topic, but a little bit different. Bye now. Hey, this is a share for a very special person out there. But I wanted to explain at their request what happens or what should he be aware of now that he's turning 18 and he was a surviving child of a deceased parent receiving a child's benefit that way. That was the typical dependent benefit for a child. Turns out he's disabled under the rules. And that was pretty clear when he was approaching 18 because it had been a disability since birth. But anyway, so the endeavor was, when you are turning 18, they're going to send you a letter saying your benefits are stopping, you're turning 18 unless you are disabled. And you want to get on that and follow all the directions for proving that you're disabled. Because when you prove that, you can then continue benefits, not as a minor, but as a disabled adult child under that same parent's work record, okay? But there's some things you have to know. You know how there's all sorts of rules for SSI? That's the welfare benefit that is not Social Security. The DAC benefit, disabled adult child, is not welfare. It is an insurance benefit paid for by the parent you had that passed away. So he or she bought that insurance through the Social Security program, the taxation and all that. So it is not a welfare benefit. However, there are some rules because it is still a dependency benefit. So the reason why you got it as a child is because you are a dependent child. All children are, unless they're perhaps emancipated or something. So when you hit 18 and you're no longer a dependent and you're out of high school, you can still be dependent on that parent if you are disabled. So the crux of this is, the best way to maybe remember it is, you can't really do anything that's going to change your dependency on that parent's work record. So the biggest thing I think of is, A, you obviously can't be earning a lot because then you're not disabled. So there is that earnings limit like it applies to every other disabled person. So know those rules, SGA, trial work period, I suppose. But keep in mind towards those rules, we have playlists on those. But the other big thing is marriage. generally you have to be unmarried. There is an exception, as I understand it, for those that marry another person who is a DAC recipient. So it would be another disabled person who's getting DAC, not just another disabled person collecting benefits or not collecting benefits. Another disabled adult child collecting off their parent. Then you can get married to that person. This is a really controversial rule, obviously. I understand the reasons for the rule. However, I also see the problems with the rule. So I don't know what the solution is, but this is where it stands now. So you have to keep that in your mind. This is how it's similar to SSI, except actually it's more exacting. With SSI, you can get married, but if you marry someone with too much income, which is a very low bar, their income is going to be deemed to you and you're going to lose your SSI because that was a welfare needs-based program. In this case, for DAC, that's not welfare, but it no longer means you're dependent on that parent, because when we get married, the person we marry is now financially responsible for us if we are unable to support ourselves. So it's kind of like a little, I don't know, web there. So just always know you can't, I mean, in this day and age, marriage maybe isn't as common as it used to be, which is kind of a shame, but just know that you can't, without losing your DAC, and I don't think you can get it back if you then get divorced, okay? I'll have to see if that rule has changed, but I think that's the way it used to be. So the marriage thing is huge, but everything else you can get. I mean, you can inherit money, you can inherit property, you can win the lottery and be a millionaire and still get your DAC, okay? You just can't do that marriage thing and become dependent on somebody other than the parent you're receiving your benefits from. And of course, as an extra side, you have to prove that you're disabled before age 22. So while the example I was using was someone who was not legally found disabled prior to 18 because there was no benefit that could be applied for under that, because you don't have to prove disability to get a dependent benefit off of a deceased or disabled parent. You know, all children will be eligible for that. But the moment you turn 18, when that would normally cut you off and you got to go get a job, you're proving that you can't work full time and you're not working SGA. So you are eligible for that DAC. The other thing to really watch out for is the earnings. This is true of everybody collecting Social Security disability based on their own disability. But one thing that I don't believe has changed is that, let's say you aren't keeping track of your part-time job and you do earn more than the amount allowed for sufficient amount of months that you're going to be discontinued. If you then, relapse, or, your body gets, whatever's happening, you're disabled again, you can't do that more robust work and making that that extra money, you can't go back on DAC. Once you have become not legally disabled under the rules, you can't go back and say I was disabled since before 22, because you had that window when you weren't. That's a tough one too. Yeah, that one's tough. So you got to be careful about the marriage and about the earnings. I would be very, very, very well studied on that. Okay, particularly the earnings. The marriage is kind of easy. If you're not going to get married, you're not going to have to worry about it. If you're going to get married, you're going to have to give a lot of thought to it, right? Unless those rules change, which of course they can. What else are they telling us here? I'm just looking at a little blurb. I'll copy this down on the notes down below. They do remind us that as a DAC recipient, the child that now turns 18 and is disabled, you never have to have worked at all to get it, because it's based on your parents' work record. Keep those earnings down. They do also remind you about certain expenses, that if you blow it and you're working part-time and you tip over the SGA amount accidentally, you didn't realize, you might have certain expenses that could be subtracted. If let's say you're so close, you're pretty close to that limit and you did go over it, but you have certain expenses that can be counted to reduce that income. Usually they're like related to you as a disabled person being able to do the job. It could be co-pays for pain management visits that help you keep your pain down so you can do that job. Otherwise, you wouldn't be doing it at all. So it's like impairment related work expenses.
Those things are always good to keep track of. If you have them, I would always save all those receipts, even while you're working, everything's good. Just in case you accidentally go over, don't realize that something could happen, brain fart, whatever. You'll have those receipts, in your back pocket to be like, oh, I can't get these numbers down. And then I'm not going to lose my benefits forever. Right. But it brings up a good point. If you are working part-time, all under the limits, you're not going to lose your DAC. You will most likely eventually get your own work record, because we get that from very part-time work. So even if you're doing very part-time work, you will have your own. So that's kind of a little buffer. So if you did lose your DAC benefits due to work or marriage, now you have your own work record, and you could just go file for disability and prove it on your own work record. And you no longer have to prove that you were disabled for age 22 and never became undisabled due to working too much. So, we can have different eligibilities. So you could have one on your own work record, and you have the one you're collecting under your parent. And the reason why you would be collecting the one under your parent is either because you didn't have one at all when you turned 18, or, when you were eligible for DAC, you didn't have a work record, or you did, but the benefit amount was so terribly low, the DAC was way more, and you always get to have the highest one that you're eligible for. You don't get both, but you can always have the highest one. So, but you could, in theory, and not that unrealistic theory either, earn as much as you might be getting under DAC, because DAC is 75%. And if you're collecting under your own, it would be 100% of whatever yours is. So, granted, you're going to be earning it from part-time work, right? Unless you recover temporarily, let's say 5 years, you're out there working, you're making money, you're off of DAC, and then you become disabled again, things get worse, something happens. You could, and you're working full-time and now you're not, you could again file. It would be under your own work record, not your parents', because now you kind of cut that off when you worked more than a disabled person works. So you were no longer disabled as a young adult. Okay. But then you became disabled again, and you can apply under your own work record. All right. All righty. I hope that helps. Marriage, working too much. But you can inherit, you can win the lottery, the gambling, be gifted lots of things, win prizes, whatever the case may be. So I don't know, that's good news. That would not be the same with SSI. So I still love DAC. The marriage thing is a stickler, but and very important to remember, but hopefully can all get around that, share the love, just don't get married. All right, bye guys.